Okay, so as I was saying, I won't argue. It just will not happen. We should be able to discuss things like adults. I have often felt like the situation was a little too volatile to speak about politics. So I have refrained from it. My bad. I thought there was more desire for joy and for a real change in this nation. As I said, I have some unique perspectives on things because of my life experiences. Everybody has some sort of a unique perspective because everybody has a different life perspective. I am on a fixed income. I know what it means to be hit by the cost of eggs. I know what it means to get hit by the cost of a lot of things. I also worked union. So I can also tell you that the people in the upper echelons of business do not keep costs low to benefit the customer. They keep costs low to benefit them. Well, because they figure that that is the only price that people will pay. When we run into something kind of a tragedy, like we did with COVID, prices go up and they stay up. Why? Because business CEOs and the upper 1% have begun to realize people can pay that amount. We're going to keep it at that amount. Think for a minute what happened after 9/11. Gas prices, you could get a gallon of gas for $1. After 9/11, gas prices shot up. They skyrocketed. They never came back down. Why? Because plain and simple, the people that actually own those companies found out. They say they can't pay it, but they can. If it's really important to them, if it's a dire situation. Thus, I say that greed has really infested this country. As a union laborer, I can tell you, we fought. I used to have a friend that I would continually argue with. Her husband worked a union job. She was totally against it. Didn't like the union. Felt like they shouldn't have to pay those union dues. It wasn't doing any good for them. I told her, do you have health care? Yes. You can thank your union. Do you have a house? Do you get to see your husband on the weekends? Does he get paid overtime if he works more? Well, yes, but companies have to pay that. Why do you think companies have to pay that? Because at one point in time, people stood up, the workers that were being walked on. They stood up and they realized we're stronger together. And they stood and pushed back against the CEOs, the big companies. They said no more. You will give us weekends. You will give us paid vacations. You will give us health care. You will let us retire. That is what unions have done. We are now dealing with a situation where we have individuals that are in office that flat out have said they would fire people before they paid them overtime. How does that figure into the new economy? How does that figure into how you pay for your eggs the next time around? I was union. I can tell you what unions did. I can tell you the good and the bad. But I can also tell you that whatever bad I experienced was far and away outweighed by the good. It is like everything else in this world. It's going to be good and it's going to be bad. It's what you want to focus on that is going to matter. I met some really fantastic and amazing men and their wives, many of whom I could probably still call on today. I also met a lot of jerks. A lot of jerks, men and women, that felt like they were owed all of these things without any kind of a struggle or a fight. It's not how it works. That's not how America got built. It wasn't handed to you. It was a struggle. It was a fight. Women weren't even allowed to actually vote until 1920. It was not until the 1970s that women had finally fought for the rights to get a loan of their own, to get credit cards of their own, to be able to go to the same colleges. The same colleges that happened a little bit earlier. I'll give you that. But we weren't able to get a home loan. We weren't able to have a credit card that was in our names. It had to be in our husband's names. I don't have a husband. Quite happily, I do not have a husband. I do not want a husband. I am in menopause at this point in my life, and I can guarantee to you that there are times my dog and cat get up and leave the room in disgust because I just turned the whole bed into an inferno. If you honestly think that I have any desire to have anybody try to hug me, snuggle me, no, just go away. I have no interest in it. I really don't. Not at this point in my life. Maybe in another 10, 20 years, I'll start to feel, oh, it'd be nice to have somebody else around. It ain't happening today. And in all honesty, at the rate things are going, I can't even tell you that I'm going to be around in another 10 or 20 years. Just because, like I said, there are physical problems. The physical problems can cause a lot of other problems. Memory loss. The memory loss can and does sometimes make the physical problems worse. Yesterday, I locked myself out of my home and had to break back into my home. That is why, for the most part, my head is being supported and I am leaning up against pillows because I'm in pain. I have patches up and down my back. I take a leave by the handful. There are problems. They are things that are being worked on. I have good doctors. But I did not have those because they were given to me. I have those because somewhere down the line in the history of this country, someone fought for those. and I thank them. Admittedly, I paid for Social Security. I paid for it when I started working at the age of 15. I paid for Social Security and Medicare from the time I was 15, working at a Burger King. So no, I cannot say that I feel like I am just a problem to America. I am where I am because of what I have given. Now I'm going to touch on something very touchy. And I'm just hoping I can actually get some of these uploaded. I have one working on it right now. I had a friend that, oopsie, told you, not high quality. I had a friend that I grew up with. I'm telling you these things because this is what formed my desire to stay single. This is what formed me. This is how I came to make some of the decisions that I made. I grew up with a friend of mine, kindergarten through high school. She moved away for a little while when we were about 12 or 13. When she was 13, she had her first sexual experience. It was by rape. She was out with a group of friends. She thought she was safe. Her mother thought she would be safe. Thought she knew who she was out with. She wound up being raped. Later, they would move back to our hometown, and that friend began dating a young man that was a very good-looking guy. He was athletic. He was an all-American guy. People thought very well of him. At some point, my friend got pregnant. And she had to have an abortion. I believe it was after he got drunk one night and raped her. I could be wrong. One way or another, she had to have an early termination of that pregnancy. Not because she had gotten pregnant and just didn't want it, but because her body was not able to sustain her life and the life of the child, and they were both dying. I wish with all of my heart and soul that I could tell you that that was where the story of her problems with that man ended. They're not. It's not. Years later, when we would be in our 20s, I was in the apprenticeship. She was going through a divorce. She had come back to our hometown, and she was explaining to me how the guy had come back to town and wanted to talk to her. And he didn't apologize. They met and they spoke where she would feel safe and not in any way threatened by another potential rape. And they spoke. And she sat there with me crying, telling me that what had occurred was this this man came back to speak to her and tell her that his new fiance felt that my friend really needed to find God, needed to come to Jesus. Because if she didn't, she was going to burn in hell. And he felt like he was accountable for her soul because he didn't stop her from killing their child. Now, is that story any different from something others have had to deal with? Yes, I held her hand. Yes, I was there for my friend. Yes, I know how hard the choice was for her. I know the trauma that it created within her. I know the pain and fear that she felt. I know the worry she had over not being able to have children again. I know because whether I agreed with what she did or not, I was there for her. Because she is just as important as any unborn within her. She was always just as important. And when she needed me, I wanted to be there. I had another friend that I met while I was in community college. It was actually before I had gotten into the electrical apprenticeship. That friend's story is quite public. She wrote a book about it. It's called 8 Days in Darkness. I won't say her name. If you really want to know, you look the book up. I say read it. She was raped. She was kidnapped. She was taken across state lines. She was repeatedly raped for days and kept locked in a box for days before the FBI found her. They rescued her. They brought her home. One of the things that she says is that she felt very blessed that the morning after pill, mifepristone or whatever generic it was still available to her. Because without it, she can't tell you what she would have done. And she is a Christian. And I will also tell you, I have seen her smile since the incident, since her rape, her abduction. I can tell you what caused her abduction. It was not that she was promiscuous. It was not that she was flirty. It was because she was in student affairs doing a work-study program. Because by the time that she was kidnapped and raped, she and I had split ways, and I was in the electrical apprenticeship, and she was going to a 4-year college. She was doing a work-study program. Because like so many, college was so stinking expensive. And she was working her way through by being there at the school, helping people. Saying, hey, this is where you go. Hi, how you doing? She had a great personality. She was suited for it perfectly. Her crime was that she was nice to a guy that was a little weird. And because of that, he convinced himself that she would love him whether she liked it or not. No, that's not all that I know of women's violations. I myself, praise God, I've never had to deal with it. Not in that sense. In other respects, yeah. I can definitely say that yes, I have been assaulted. I have been discriminated against. I can tell you of another woman. This is a little more recently. She was having a medical procedure and she was strapped down to a table. She's not said anything to anybody since, because she really... Well, it was a fluke that I found out, but she couldn't tell you if she was just paranoid or if it was something that really happened. But she laid on that table for a procedure that really didn't require anyone to be anywhere near her rear end. She felt the doctor continually up and down the crack of her rear. These are things that happen. They're not things that women ask for. I lived in a third world nation where women were objects. See, we in this country, we've overcome it. And I recognized that what I was seeing in the third world nation was what was once quite common in this country. And for the life of me, I worry about it becoming a reality in this country again. Women were objects. They were possessions. They were to be owned. There was a bride price that was paid. Oftentimes little girls were married off at the age of 11, anywhere from 11 to 15. And they were usually married off to men in their 30s and their 40s. Considerable gaps. If the men were actually lucky enough to be in their 50s, a lot of them had many wives. AIDS was rampant throughout that country. And women lost their entire identity. When they got married, they lost their last name. When they had their first child, they lost their first name. If their first child was a daughter, they took the first child's name after the child was named, because they didn't always name their child for the first year of life because they weren't sure the kid would live that long. The fact is, if a woman wound up having a son as her second child, or even her third, she would then change her name from the firstborn child's, who was a daughter, to the mother of the son's name. The woman had no identity at all past the birth of her children. That is not who I am. That is not who I want to be. who I am, I can tell you that I was there for each of those women. I could hold their hand and tell them it was okay. Tell them that we were going to be all right. That we were going to make it through it. Little girls in that third world nation, a lot of times too, if they were going to school with boys their own age, that was another thing that was the boys that were their own age, or even teenagers that were in the same grade as the girls, they a lot of times would just kidnap and rape the girl so that she would have their child, because they knew once she had their child, no one would be willing to pay a bride price for her, so she would be their wife, and they would never have to pay the bride price. The woman had no say. I was there for girls that were going through that. It was not easy. Ultimately, a lot of those things are what broke me. Ultimately, a lot of those things are what wound up sending me home early. I tell you these things because, as I said, I was there for it. Could I have judged all of these women? Oh, well, her skirt was too short. She shouldn't have done this. She shouldn't have said that. She should have just minded her own business. She should have never gotten involved with him in the first place. Maybe she shouldn't have smiled at him that way. Could I have blamed the victim? Yes, I could have. Why would I have? These women were living their lives. They were not at fault. They did nothing wrong. And why should their lives be destroyed because of what some man temporarily wanted? Now, people are going to inevitably ask, do you believe in abortion? Nobody believes in abortion. Actually, let me correct that. Everybody believes in abortion. Abortion. Everybody does. Because abortion is actually a term. It's a term that we use to describe the early termination of a process. We are able to abort military procedures. We are able to abort computer programs. Those are processes. As great and as wonderful and as magnificent as God created the human body to be, the female reproductive system and pregnancy is still a process. It is a process. It is a flawed process. Nobody wants the early termination of a pregnancy. Are there those that abuse the medical procedure? Yes. Yes, there are. Yes, there are people, there are women that are going to do things that I don't agree with. But for the sake of the women that are using it to save their lives, to save their reproductive health, I will stand by them, I will support them, I will let them know that I love them, and I find them just as important as any unborn. And I will hold their hand through it, and I will weep with them if I have to. And I will pray to God to heal every one of their wounds, because I know there's a lot of them. What I will not do is tell a woman that she's going to hell. Because that's not for me to say. There is a golden thread moment. There is a moment in which Christ and only Christ can work, that comes before our last breath of life. And in that moment, I assure you, with 100% certainty, God is at work in every life, giving every single opportunity and possibility to that soul, because that is a God of love. Don't accept, it's also a God of judgment. Don't confess your sins, it is also a God of judgment. We are all sinners, we all fall short. Don't believe me? It's in here. We'll get to that part. The reason that I am saying that I want people to understand this. And I want to read this. For those that have not read it. For those that don't have the time to read it. Maybe you've got the time to actually just listen. While I don't feel that God has a gender, the Bible itself uses genders. So, I will read it to you verbatim. I use the New International Version. This is called the Quest Study Bible. This is not the first copy of it. My first copy of the Quest Study Bible was given to me by someone I dearly love. And I used the daylights out of it. In fact, it is on a shelf and it is swollen and duct taped and a mess. If your Bible's got dust on it, if it only sees the light of day on Sunday and Wednesday night, it's time to dust it off. Let's go through it. Let's get to know it. Because there's a lot of things in here that people are saying it says that it does not say. There's a lot of things in here that people are saying it says, and they're using it to hurt others. And there's a lot of things in here that it does say that people conveniently forget or just don't want to mention. And we need to hear it. We need to know it. Maybe you don't believe in God. I believe that God is one of the greatest scientists ever. Most amazing biologist. Proves it in the body. Proves it with the platypus. I believe that God is one of the most incredible geologists. I see it every single time I look at the world around me. That brings us to another subject. The world around us. We're stewards. Drill, baby, drill, but ain't gonna get it. That might give you money in your pocket. Maybe that fills your tank. But this is the only one we've got. This is the only world, the only home. No, sorry, let me correct that. It's the only earth. As Christians, our home is not here. As Christians, our home is with God. And I will tell you, as Christians, we are to be servants. I had a discussion with my mom one time. She just randomly looked at me and she says, without thinking about it, what's the first thing you think about when you think about heaven? Right off the top of my head, I said feet. In that moment, she looked at me like I was crazy. She goes, why would feet remind you of heaven? And I told her, I said, because that's where I want to be. I want to be at the foot of the throne. I want to be at Jesus' feet. I want to be at God's feet. I want to be crying. I want to be weeping. I want to be wiping those feet off with my hair. washing them with my tears. I don't want to see gold streets. I don't want mansions. I want feet. They are ugly. They are generally hairy. But I want feet for my heaven. Does that make me better than you? No. It just means that I've had enough experiences that created within me the desire to be God's and God's alone. I had a discussion with my granddad once about Gandhi. I don't remember if I put this in the other video. I might have. Gandhi had a quote, "Live simply, that others may simply live." I quoted it incorrectly. I thought it was Margaret Mead, but at one point in time I had several quotes up on my wall, and one was Margaret Mead's, and several were Gandhi's, and, well, it kind of all got kerfuffled. Excuse me. The quote was, "Live simply, that others may simply live." We don't need bells and whistles, people. We really don't. Christ did not have a mansion on earth. Christ did not have riches. His mandates weren't to get every dime you can. Feed the hungry. Clothe the poor. Feed the spirit of the unbeliever. They're written in red so that they stand out. God is the ultimate in truth. And we need to remember that. We really need to remember that. As for this world, we're stewards of this world. The Native Americans have long believed that you should not ever take more from the earth than what you can use. We continually violate that, and in violating that, we are violating the natural order of the earth and therefore causing our own demise. We were sent here to protect. We were placed here to protect and take care of this world. Don't believe me? It's in the very first book, in Genesis. It is some of the very first things that were created. Mankind was given a job by God. We were tasked with stewardship of the earth and caretaking of all creations within it. That brings us to another really popular subject: homosexuality. Now, I know you're going to say, "Oh, I know what the Bible says about that. Well, God killed them. God destroyed them. God said, don't do it." You're right. The Bible does say. Oopsie. Excuse me. The Bible does say, don't do it. The Bible also says, don't eat shrimp. Don't combine fabrics. Don't unequally yoke your oxen. And if you want to get real serious and actually have a conversation about it, Sodom and Gomorrah were not destroyed because of homosexuality. It does not say that. It says sexual iniquity. You want to know what sexual iniquity is? Having more than one partner. Even though the Bible has multiple bigamy and polygamy marriages throughout it. Kings married to hundreds of wives. It is actually considered to be a sin to have more than one partner. That means and it even says, if you have relations with a married woman, you have sinned. If you have relations with a divorced woman, you have sinned by way of sexual iniquity. It's not popular, but it's in there. People say, oh, well, God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah because of it. Like I said, God actually destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah because of sexual iniquity. Homosexuality, they tell me, goes against the natural order of things. Really? In nature, almost every single species has homosexual tendencies. In almost every species, you will find homosexuality within the natural world. Oh, well, God wouldn't create something that He destroyed. Explain to me, then, what you have to say about intersexual individuals. Back in the day when I was growing up, they were called hermaphrodites. They are now known as intersexual. They are born, come forth from the womb, having both male and female genitalia. Back in the 80s, it was a really big deal because it began to become known that for generations, parents and doctors were making decisions when those children were born into this world with both female and male genitals. They were assigned a sex at birth. Whichever sex it was easier to give them. If it was easier to give them the total female genitalia, that's what they did. If it was easier to give them the total male genitalia, that's what they did. It wasn't until later, the 80s and 90s, that we started to understand that there is more about a person and their sexuality than just their physical body. So I'm going to tell you right now, you don't know the mind of God. You don't even know your own mind as well as you probably should. You don't even know the inner workings of your own physical body as well as you should. So you cannot tell me what God will and will not create. What you can do is love the person, That is the command that Christ gave. Maybe you don't agree with everything. I personally, I have panic attacks when I leave my home anymore. I'm not a people person. I'm not overly friendly, which drives me. I have people that actually think I'm waving to them. I have to ride a bicycle. It's an electric one. It pretty much does everything for me. It's been wonderful. But I have to ride a bicycle. I have to use hand signals. People think I'm waving at them just because I'm signaling. I'm not. But when they start to think, well, she's waving, hi, I suddenly turn polite. Just because it's something you don't agree with does not mean that you cannot love them through it. Okay? You don't know the mind of God. You might have God in your heart and you might have God in your spirit. But I'm telling you now that you are not in God's place and you don't get to judge them. And I'm going to tell you right now, again, let he who is without sin cast the first stone. Ask me the Bible or ask me the book, verse. Can't do it. I don't know it. I know it's in there. No, I didn't just get that one from church. I got that from reading it because it means that much to me. I have an incredibly hard time from not judging others as well. I'm not a very big fan of being lied to at all. I'm not. I really am not. But it's not my place to judge. Can I hold them accountable? If I really feel pressed by God, I will. Most of the time, when you look at a person and go, really? They know what you're thinking. You look at them and you go, okay. They can pretty much tell that you're aware. They're not necessarily telling you the truth. A lot of people, that's how they go through their life. They lie their way through. And that's, for the most part, fine. If it hurts somebody else, though, that's when we need to stand up and say, no more. When you cause someone else pain because you don't want to acknowledge the truth, when you cause someone else pain because you want to bring attention to a situation, whether it's really happening or not, that's where you need to be held accountable and you need to be stopped. And that is also in this. I will tell you, I think that God is the greatest scientist. God created it all. God knows how best to love it all. All we can ever do is hope to walk in those enormously big shoes. I have often said to a family member or friend, I can't believe how many people out there have not read the Bible. Let me do it for you. 15 minutes a day, maybe 20. Depends on how far I get carried away. Let me read to you what my God says in the book where it is spoken. Now, go to a church. They will get more involved in telling you how this book came about. This is a canon. Not all translations are completely correct. I will tell you that right up front. I will also tell you that for the amount of authors that wrote it, and the amount of time that it took for it to be consolidated, it is miraculously cohesive. It also applied to the time in which it was written. Some of it doesn't translate to this life. Slavery is not okay. It wasn't okay back in that time. It's not okay in this time. Judging a person by the color of their skin. It wasn't okay in that time. It's not okay in this time. I have news for you. Those of you that think that Christ had blue eyes, sandy blonde hair, long, straight, you are wrong. Jesus was not white, people. Jesus was brown. And not just slightly tan. You can see it in the people that live in that area of the world today. Their skin color is brown. When you judge someone with a hypermelanistic skin tone, you are judging Christ. Keep it in mind. I would like very much to read this to you. Like I said, no, it is not the King James Version. Yes, I have read the King James Version. I have read the New King James Version. I tried to read the Message. It really messed me up. For some people, it works. For me, the New International Version works best. That is the one that I will be reading from. It is The Quest. Today, I will read you some of my favorite verses. And then we will just simply go from there to merely reading the Bible. I'm not going to discuss politics any further. I'm not going to explain the Bible to you. I am going to just give you the Bible. Let God speak to you. Let it sit in your soul so that you actually feel what God is trying to say. And if you don't like what I'm offering, you can blame two people. One is Michelle Obama because she told me to do something. The other is God, because God said to speak. And just so you know, this goes back to the early termination of pregnancy. I want you to realize it didn't start with medical procedures. Pretty sure I said that. It didn't start in the 1950s, the 1960s, and the 1970s. The medical procedure that allows women to safely terminate a pregnancy early started in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. It started in modern medical times. The medical procedure did. You want to know when the first early termination of the pregnancy happened? Before time was ever recorded. Somewhere back in our history, whether you want to look at it and say it was, through the whatever scientific time it was. That's part of why I like this Bible, because it actually does give you what is occurring in the world as well as what is occurring in the church. Sorry, that was an aside. Easily distracted. But the thing is the early termination of pregnancy did not begin with a medical procedure. It began with the first woman that realized her pregnancy was killing her. It began with the first woman that realized she was about to have a child that she really didn't want. And she used herbs. She used sticks. She used stones. She terminated that pregnancy. And I will tell you now, and you're not going to like this, probably haven't liked any of it, but if you want to be angry with someone over the early termination of pregnancies, you have to start with God. Because if you believe that God is omniscient, you believe that God is omnipresent, you believe that God is omnipotent, you believe that God sees it all, knows it all, hears it all, formed it in the womb before even the very creation, then you have to know that God knew from the beginning of time, before calling forth even the first star, God knew that there would come a day when a woman would look at an herb and recognize the child that is growing in me is killing me. I have to do something. So she used an herb. God could have foregone creating that herb. God could have stopped her from having that thought. If you believe in God, and you believe in God's power, and you believe in God's knowledge of it all, then you also have to believe that God allows us to make a choice. God allows us to choose to serve. God allows us to choose the path. He presents the options. He'll knock at that door. It's just like that photo. Every Christian knows it. That not photo, but painting. Jesus standing there knocking at the door. Everybody says, you look real close. There's no doorknob. You're right, there's not. You have the option of opening that door up to Christ. You have the option of not opening that door up to Christ. But God was the creator of pro-choice. The only thing that mankind did was make it medically safe. And I will tell you that the ones that made it medically safe, they were given the idea by God. So, you get a choice. I will read it. I have told you how I feel about it. I've told you why I've made the choices I've made in my life. And I've told you why I believe what I believe. I will read this and I will let you decide. And hopefully I can get these things to upload and it will go easier. I'm going to shut this video off because it's a very long one, and I'm going to come back and I'll give you a few of my favorite verses. And then tomorrow we'll have a cup of tea, read a little bit, and then we'll go on and start our days. I'm also going to give you a prayer. I'm going to warn you that the prayer is a very powerful one. I've prayed it for many years. If you pray it, be prepared, because you will get used.